meeting, no. Okay, we will call the meeting to order. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our first item this evening is the minutes of the regular council meeting held on Tuesday, September 8th. Recommendations to approve.
Moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is consideration of fourth and final readings to official community plan amendment bylaw number 4551 and rezoning amendment bylaw number 4552. In addition, there's also a development permit authorization, all pertaining to 525 and 535 North Road. Staff recommendation is that council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam official community plan amendment bylaw number 4551 and fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4552. And that council approve the signing and sealing of the development permit for 525 and 535 North Road, and that Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. All in. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. I had just two questions. One, I was just curious as to why only the one-bedroom units were going to be adaptable. And my other question was the amount being given for upgrading the park. I think that is absolutely awesome. I'm just wondering though, is that a percentage of the building value, or is that a cost that's been worked out because a budget has already been put together? I thought there was going to be consultation with the city on what might be happening. So is that just a percentage of something? Because before it was I think the $400,000 figure. Now it's a very specific figure.
Mr. Johansson.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Wilson, the park contribution is based on a per unit contribution. It's consistent with other applications involving that.
Okay. And the adaptable units?
Why is it only one bedrooms that are adaptable?
Thank you, through the chair. The one-bedroom unit was the one that was most easily configured to allow for the adaptable components, with the additional widths for the turnaround areas and the other accessibility components of it. And I believe that's why the applicant chose to use the one-bedroom units.
And our city does not require, we encourage, but we don't require adaptable units. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Zerlo.
Some thank yous to staff. I know it wasn't mentioned by me, but it was mentioned by other councillors that night about having a little bit more variation in the design of the building. So thank you so much for that. I remember on the night of the public hearing and our first couple of readings that the proponent had to answer a whole bunch of questions, and I want to thank you very much for that. But I did just want to reiterate some of the ones that I asked on the evening, and one is about the camera, possibility of a camera. I'd still like to see a camera, if possible, through the chair in the parking lot, just for safety. The other one is I had asked about getting buyer information, whether we could sign a non-disclosure or we could do something to be able to gather some information so that we'll have a better idea about planning, what we need to plan for amenities in that area. So just to remind staff that I'm still interested in us gathering that information to help us make decisions. And I did ask on the night about variances, and the answer was no, and we do have one variance here, but I'm totally okay with that variance. And I would also like to take this time to thank the proponent for the park upgrades for the local park. It's amazing, and I will be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none others. Fourth reading and a development permit. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Next item, item 3, pertains to the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy. Proposed amendments to reflect recently adopted regional context statements, bylaw number 1223. Staff recommendations that Council inform Metro Vancouver in writing that it supports the proposed minor amendments to the regional growth strategy contained in the Greater Vancouver Regional District Regional Growth Strategy Amendment bylaw number 1223.
Okay, moved by one of our Metro reps, Councillor Hodge, seconded by his alternate, Councillor Marsden. Think, anybody? No? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Item 4 is a housekeeping text amendments to the zoning bylaw, zoning text amendment bylaw number 4586. Staff recommendations that Council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4586. That bylaw number 4586 be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. Councillor Reid.
To ask, so under 1 Part 2 canopy, it says that it talks about awnings in the bylaw, but not canopies. And canopy is defined as what? As a cloth or other thing?
Through your worship, the Councillor Reid, yes, the canopy refers to a rigid weather protection structure, typically made out of steel and glass, whereas an awning could be something that's fabric-based.
If I may suggest, when you say canopy, I think in the first one it should say what it is, and then when you say awning, it should be explicit in brackets around both of those words at the beginning or somewhere, wherever you explain it. I want to get down onto the height, where we revise the definition to ensure all uses, height by average grade. Do we have something in our bylaw with respect to grading of the lots, like people that are bringing in, you know, truckloads of dirt to raise or taking them away to lower? Otherwise changing the...
Yes, through your worship. Right now, the way we calculate height with average grade is we take the lower of existing or finished grade. So it's not beneficial to bring in extra grade to manipulate, as we'll still take the worst case scenario.
lowest, even if, but they could build that up, couldn't they? Not very likely, I would think.
Well, because we'd be taking the survey pre-construction.
Okay, gotcha, thank you, that's good. And I am general regulations. It says add advanced light rail rapid transit and sub as a permitted use within all zones. Do we ever want to put LRT in case we get lucky and get something else? Going up to Burke Mountain would be nice. Can't get a bus, but maybe we could get light rail. Just being wishful.
Or something, you're being something.
Anyhow, I just wondered if you should put that definition into. And I think I'm okay for, yeah, the rest I answered myself. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Zarillo.
I had just a couple of questions. The first one is also on page 2, part 2, about garden cottage. So do we have another definition for garden sheds, like as an accessory building? Like, do we have another one? Because we're going to take away accessory use and make it as a dwelling. So what do we have? What falls under accessory use?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. Accessory uses are usually other residential uses that are typically associated with a one-family residential use, such as a shed, as you mentioned, greenhouse, that type of idea. Really, this isn't changing the definition so much of the carriage house, but it's just clarifying how we define it and how we consider it, and that it is actually a dwelling unit, much like a secondary suite is also considered an accessory dwelling unit.
So is there any historic where people have been given this garden cottage and now they can start using it as a dwelling?
No, the garden cottages have been permitted in the past, and this is really just clarifying exactly what we mean with it.
And then my other one is, I just need some explanation. I'm sorry, I didn't really understand fully part 12, bullet point 6, part 12, the apartment zones. I wonder if I could just get some clarification on the 2 bullet points. What are we saying in these 2 bullet points?
Through your worship to Councillor Zerillo, I will take the first point, and Mr. Jarvie will take the second. When the RM6 zone was brought in its current form, it was intended for use around rapid transit in the higher density areas, but typically we don't, the intent in zones aren't geographically based, except for this one. We actually have RM6 zone properties that are outside of core areas in existence today. So we want to make sure that that's consistent with the rest of the bylaw, reflects reality. And again, it's also something that it's something that fits into the high density residential land use in our neighborhood plans, and something that would have to go through a process to be rezoned by council.
So just to be clear, so this just opens up the opportunity to have high density, unlimited height apartment buildings outside of the core areas?
That's correct, in shoulder areas adjacent to core areas, and it also reflects current conditions where there are high density RM6 properties in shoulder areas, for example, along Austin Avenue and Whiting Way, and also the Polygon development, Windsor Gate.
Thank you so much. And then the second one.
Thank you, through your worship. Just further elaborating on what Mr. Johansson already said, these amendments to the RM6 zone came out as a result of the TDS, and one of the things we committed to do was to revisit the zones used for the Transit Village commercial land use designation, as well as the high density apartment land use designation. And when we went through that process, we increased the allowable densities of the RM4, RM5, RM6, as well as the C7 zones. And when we increased the densities of the RM6 zone, there was this outlying regulation that was in the building size, and it limited the number of units per hectare in a building. It was really a holdover from the previous versions of this zone. So when we amended the zone to increase the density, unfortunately, we errantly left this regulation in, and this amendment seeks to rectify that and remove it to reflect the actual achievable densities and the achievable form of the new RM6 zone.
I have an additional question on that one through the chair. So which one supersedes? What would be the superseding ruling if we left this in? Would it be the units per hectare, or would it be the density as defined in the zoning?
Excuse me. Density isn't regulated through this regulation. Okay. Density is regulated through a maximum floor area ratio for the site. So it's contrary to regulate the number of units when we have a floor area total that's much higher that you can achieve. So this isn't actually setting a density cap on the site. It's really just setting how many units are permitted within a building on site.
We don't need that anymore?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for those clarifications.
I've got very little. First of all, housekeeping text amendments are different from text amendments. Text amendments change the regulation. Housekeeping text amendments change the language so that the language more accurately reflects what the regulation's intent was initially. At least that's how I've always perceived it, and I think Mr. McIntyre is not arguing anyway. I get to, for example, in under 2, Part 5, the second and third bullets are both somewhat changes to the regulations rather than housekeeping. Housekeeping, generally speaking, tidies things up rather than changes. The same thing with part 10 under bullet 4, which is actually a change to the regulations because we had a requirement that you couldn't build a 21-foot long garage, for example. Is Mr. Johansson? I think he knows where I'm going. Yes.
Yes, through your worship, excellent questions. It is, yeah. Yes, it's a housekeeping amendment, but to make the language more direct, clear for the development community and public council and everyone involved. But there are some relatively minor new features that you've pointed out that we have brought along that we feel don't affect development per se, but will help to implement the bylaw a little bit easier. For example, the definition of the canopy. The sighting distance one is there for something that we've encountered in a number of subdivision and development applications where there's a need to have a clear sight line where lanes and streets intersect. And we didn't have policy that was requiring a clear sight line in those areas. So that's something that came up again and again. So we wanted to put in the bylaw to make that sort of something that you have to go through as part of the process. And with the RTM1 garages, we looked at that one from the perspective of a number of projects that had come forward with variances for that very thing, where you have a double garage, but in RTM1, because it's a row home, the two spaces are divided by an interior party wall. So we were finding that we needed a little bit more space. And for the bay windows, that's also allowing glazing on projections into a lane scenario, and we already do allow that. So this is a case where glazing can be allowed as a part of that as well.
That's in lane or outside corners. Effectively, it's subject to the requirements for limiting distance in the code. Mr. McIntyre, something?
Yes, if I can, Your Worship, thank you and good evening. Point taken. Sometimes these housekeeping amending bylaws get to be a bit of a basket. A lot of things get thrown in it, nothing too significant. But truly, there is some updating here. There are some minor changes and tweaks, but also some housekeeping where we're removing inconsistencies that were overlooked before. So we'll, in the future, when we bring these sort of omnibus updating bylaws together forward to council, we'll appropriate label them.
Well, even if it was text amendments and
Housekeeping.
Including housekeeping text amendments, so that the public won't accuse us of trying to sneak some actual text amendment into a housekeeping bylaw. Mr. Johansson.
Yes, and when we present this at the public hearing, we can highlight that as a part of our presentation.
Appreciate it. Anybody else? It's first reading in a public hearing. All in favor? All opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 5, pertains to Town Centre Park Outdoor Performance and Event Plaza. This is the final detailed design plan and budget. Staff recommendations that Council approve the Town Centre Outdoor Performance and Event Plaza detailed design plan as per the report before you. 2, that staff be authorized to proceed with project procurement and construction of the Town Centre Outdoor Performance and Events Plaza, utilizing the approved funding in the 2015 capital plan of $1 million from bonus density and $1.7 million in additional funding that will be identified in 2016 capital plan, for a total budget of $2.7 million. And 3, direct staff to work with the Arts and Culture Committee to update the festival and special events policy for council approval in the spring of 2016 to manage events in Town Centre Park.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor O'Neill. Okay, one moment, please. Why don't you push it now? Okay. Okay, yeah. I thought you flashed up and then perhaps you pushed it again. So, it's true, Councillor O'Neill. Last week we were all given a 2-hour class and an exam on operating the new PA system. You weren't here. My deep apologies. I will, of course, adjust the order of speaking so that you're still going to be last. Councillor Reid.
Mine is to do with the electrical and around the whole lake. And I know I had it underlined here somewhere, but I can't find it, of course. We were going to limit it to powering the plaza space, but we have been biting away at the electrical around the lake. We got the the water feature in the fountain inn, and then we got that side of the lake lit up. How far are we around the whole lake now? Because part of the beauty of the plaza space will be to be able to look at the lake lit up. So I'd like to know what costs and what portion that we're missing.
Through the chair.
Ms. Hunt.
Actually, the electrical costs for the lighting around the lake are included in the plaza cost because it will be powered off the same kiosk. So we haven't eliminated that. We are providing, what we have eliminated is additional electrical to power the greater festival events site that would be beyond the plaza.
Perfect. I'm happy. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll try and clarify that. Right now, we have lighting on the seawall portion of it. Lighting then under this program continues the rest of the way.
We won't, through the chair, we won't actually continue the lighting, but however, we're installing the infrastructure so that the park's operations people can continue it. Yes.
There you go. Thank you very much. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, actually, I think Councillor O'Neill did punch in before me there. Change the order, or should I just go?
Why don't we, well, I'll defer then. Councillor O'Neill. One moment.
Thank you very much. Yes, I can hear myself. I'm so glad I'm back in the saddle to be here when this report has come forward, because I'm an advocate of this and I'm a strong supporter of it, and I will be voting in favor of proceeding with this. I know that over the last several months we've been talking about this. There's been various discussions, points made about some issues regarding it, and I want to talk more generally about some of the support that's been shown by the community for this. I've been serving on the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee as chair or vice chair for 4 years now, and I know that when this came before the committee just last spring in April, it didn't come specifically there. This is the most recent time that the committee talked about generally outdoor performance spaces, and that was giving feedback to the Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategic Plan consultant. And there were 2 points made that I think are germane to this discussion tonight, and one that the committee felt that the city has made excellent arts initiatives over the past, and including bringing festivals, but that it meant the city must now take the opportunity to move on from that to do something with a more tangible legacy. And I think this is sort of a legacy project, especially when you consider it in conjunction with the 2016 125th birthday celebration. That's a real legacy. The committee also said that noted how outdoor-oriented Coquitlam is, and that the city should be using more of its outdoor spaces to promote public arts. And boy, if we listen to the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee in anything to deal with this report, this is one thing we should listen to them on, because this is definitely a place where all sorts of different public arts can be celebrated, performed, enjoyed. It was also important, I think, to note that as part of the forum research last spring, a public opinion survey that's scientifically valid into the questions that was, the survey was made to seek public opinion about arts, culture, and heritage to help put together the new strategic plan. That 83% of people supported an outdoor plaza, 81% said they would visit an outdoor plaza, and 76% said they're interested in outdoor music festivals. So those are all sorts of things, with at least 3/4 of Coquitlam residents in a scientifically valid survey supported either generally or more specifically a project such as this. I think that's important to point out too. There's also been concerns expressed about budgeting for this, maybe if and how that budgeting, how we might be able to afford this. And one of the things that came to my mind was the fact that this is in the Broad City Center area, and that the city successfully raised quite a few $1 million to support the Lincoln Station, and then all of that money was not actually needed to pay for the Lincoln Station because we got a pretty big, substantial federal government grant on that. And there's many funding opportunities that are funds that can go into supporting the construction of this outdoor plaza. But certainly one that would be a natural would be this particular fund as well, and there's several $1 million balance in that fund as well. So thinking that's money that won't have any taxpayer impact if we do go a little over budget, if we don't get the grant that we're hoping for. So I don't think that stands in the way. Quite a concern we heard quite a bit from those people who did express concerns about this was the amount of noise that this might generate. And I was really pleased to see that the detailed survey of the done by a firm here, the noise impact assessment done by experts, talked about how essentially, if you want to boil it down, the noise that a concert would produce or performance might produce there is not much more significant than the ambient noise that's already there. And if you look at some of these decibel figures, noise impacts are estimated at 53 decibels, 61, 57, 66, 56, 64, at these various locations. These are not particularly high, even in a context of a relatively quiet area. In an increasingly urban area with lots of traffic, these are quite acceptable. It should be noted, I looked up the decibel readings for basically your descriptions of what 50 decibels is, 60, 70. 60 decibels is described as conversation in a restaurant or an office or being in a room with some background music. And that's 60 decibels, and there won't be very many times, I think, when we're going to go that high with this. 50 decibels would be a very quiet suburb or conversation at home in the living room. If they get up to 70 decibels, that sounds pretty loud. And is there anything here estimated to be 70 decibels? No. That's if you're sitting in your family room with your TV on or your radio on. That's usually around 70 decibels. So we're not talking next to Vancouver International Airport, the jets coming in. So, and I am persuaded as well that we're going to be controlling this site and we'll be able to keep an eye on it, or more specifically an ear on what goes on there, and respond to any problems that do take place. So for all of those reasons, those are mostly reactions to some concerns I've heard, but there are the very positive things as well about the enjoyment that a plaza like this can bring to a community. I've had the pleasure over the last month of traveling in Europe with my wife and then with my brothers, and two of the highlights of that travel were outdoor events that we stumbled onto or actually found that we'd heard about. And one of them was at a plaza in a park where there was a DJ just playing swing jazz music. And there were couples of all ages dancing to this music, people sitting around on the grass watching those couples dance, and beautiful evening. And that was in Lisbon, Portugal. And a couple weeks later, I was in a city in Spain, and we walked out of our hotel, and around the corner there's this big plaza, and there was a small band set up, and they were playing dance music that I guess was attractive to people about 70 years old and older, and we watched them for a few minutes and then went off for dinner and came back about 2 hours later, and they were all still dancing. It was beautiful to see, and this was right in the urban area, surrounded by apartment buildings, hotels, things like that. these guys could really dance too, and for hours on end. Lovely to see. And both of these were essentially performance plazas, public squares, that the sort that really animate a city and a community and really bring vitality to it. I think this Town Center Park Outdoor Performance and Event Plaza will do all of that and more. It'll do even more of that if we find a niftier name than a 6-word name for it, or 7 or 8-word name, maybe a shorter name. And then we could really celebrate. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that, what I did on my vacation. I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, it was good. Okay, Councillor Marsden, what did you do on your vacation?
I didn't dance in the streets of Lisbon, so me.
Oh, that's right. Craig is next. You're right.
I too went away for the August break, and actually, as Councillor Neal experienced, I too was in Europe, and I was remarked at some of the outdoor plazas and things that they had there, and the impromptu entertainment that took place. But I think that one of the things that I drew a comparison with is that this is our city center. This is our center park. This is our showpiece. This is where we want people to gather. This is where SkyTrain is coming. SkyTrain is going to bring people here to celebrate with us. And I think that this is an excellent opportunity for us to move ahead on something that I think the city is lacking. I think that we have done a great job on our sports facilities down there, and we've got first-class sports facilities, and I'm a big promoter of sports and have 3 boys that play sports, but I've also encouraged my boys to take up band and music and embrace the arts, and I think that this is something that we need to do, is to look at Town Center Park as a way that we can embrace the arts and bring arts to that park as well, and I think this is an opportunity to do that. It's also an opportunity to do something in advance of our 125th birthday, which is next year. And I think that this is a very fitting amenity to create a place where residents can celebrate. It's a gift to the future generations, where people will be able to come and celebrate. Young kids who may perform there in a couple of years will later be able to come back with their kids. So I think it's going to be a place where all people of all ages can gather. We'll be able to have multicultural celebrations there. As Councillor Neal mentioned, it's, our surveys are saying that people are looking for an opportunity to do this. I think at the same time that we also have to be respectful of the neighbors. And we've heard from residents in the area, we've heard concerns about noise in the area. And I think that the one thing that I think sets this aside from a lot of the complaints that we've had in the city from time to time, we hear about, outdoor patios or things. The thing that's different about this is it's our facility. We're not setting this up and then going to just turn it over to a company to run. We will still be involved in who programs, what the time restraints are, and we will have some ability, and if somebody abuses it, then we don't have to book them next year, because we actually are in control of this facility. And I think that that's one of the things that puts my mind at ease on the noise. There will be celebrations. Yes, there will be fireworks at Canada Day, and those are one of the things that we want to encourage. We want people to come together in celebration. But again, we want to do it in a respectful way, and I think that that's one of the things that I think we can achieve here. I think that the design is good. One of the things that I was really interested to see in this report was that there's a picture in attachment 1, I believe, that shows how the facility will look when it's not being programmed. I know originally the papers ran the picture that showed it with the canopy up or the dome up and all the seats and the temporary seats in place. But in picture number 2, it shows what it's going to look like on a sunny October afternoon when you're walking around the park and you can sit on these benches, look across the lake, look over at the high rises with an unobstructed view. And it's not as imposing as it appears when it's in performance mode. So I think it offers the best of both. It offers the ability to have a celebration, but it also offers some passive amenity to space to the park, that people can just stop and sit and have lunch, much like they do in these great squares in Europe that Councillor Neal and I had a chance to see. And I think that that's one of the things that sets this aside and makes it very multifunctional in my view. And that's one of the reasons why I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marsden now.
Sure.
Okay,
thank you.
he's finished.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions. So this is our detailed, we're approving the detailed design plan. On page 3, it speaks to a contingency of 10%. Are we comfortable? Is that a typical contingency once we get to the detailed design component perspective?
Yes, that's correct. At 95% drawings, the consultants have done enough detailed work that we're comfortable that the 10% is accurate.
Okay, and I ask that because initially this came forward $1 million from DCC, and it had a perception, anyways, of some additional cost creep, and so a 10% contingency, we're comfortable there. So, if that being the case, there is a comment on page 13. About mid-page where it says, as such, at minimum, an additional $1.7 million. So if we're comfortable with the 10%, why does it say at minimum?
Your Worship, I think, if I can, I think it's supposed to be at maximum. I think it assumed that if we get a heritage grant, we will only need about $1 million.
I'm much more happy to hear the at maximum versus at minimum. Do we have an update on that heritage grant at this particular point in time, or timeline for a response?
I have been in communication with the program officer at the Legacy branch, provided a bunch of additional information. She told me it'd be January before we get final confirmation of what that grant might be.
Okay. Also on page 13 then, which speaks to this $1.7 million, because in the recommendation it says to move it forward into the 2016 capital plan. Yet on page 13 it specifically states 500 from bonus density, 988 from DCC Park, along with 212 previously from general revenues in 15. So do I read that to mean that we're not looking to our taxpayers for an additional $212,000 in the coming calendar year, that the funds are already set aside?
That's correct. In 2015, we put $500,000 of general revenues in hoping to get the grant, which is a maximum of $500,000. So we wanted to make sure that we were fully funded. However, we're hoping that grant, and then we won't need that $500,000.
Okay, thank you. Again, to reiterate what a number of other people have said, I think staff has done a great job with this. I truly believe that this will be a showpiece in the park. I get that. I understand it. I think it is something that we can use, that we can program. I've expressed my concern in the past in regards to where it fits from a timing perspective with the complete development of the Town Centre Master Plan. I've come to grips with that. The one piece I still struggle with, and that was the concern of the residents with regards to noise. I appreciate the work that's gone into the study. I appreciate the results that have come back. We've talked about those a little bit. The one piece I will ask is, when we put something like this, and this is fairly significant, and I do believe there's some validity to concerns. The residents in the nearby area do have right to be concerned, so I would ask that staff develop a plan in which to monitor the sound through the first few events, especially through the Canada Day being perhaps one of the larger events that we put on there, just to get a feel to determine whether or not further mitigation needs to be brought to the table here. The report says not at this point, but I think it's appropriate that we do go through another round of testing just to make sure. The testing's been done, has been based on the sound stage being probably 750 meters to the north. So bringing it that much closer to the residents, it could have impact. I would just like to know what it is. So if we do have to step forward and mitigate that noise further, that we would take those steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. Had a couple questions. One was related to some of the feedback from the Universal Accessibility Committee. Question was about the sun, and the response was the location took that into account. It was adjusted to minimize sun interference. However, the future Plaza programming will consider summer sun patterns, particularly for evening events. I didn't quite understand what that meant. And also, I mean, it's still kind of facing southwest. So what about the sun? And if we're doing movie nights and that sort of thing, won't the sun have an impact in the summer?
Yes, through the chair. The sun, we've had the consultants do a variety of diagrams showing at what point the sun will be impacting the viewers. It's actually a very small window between sort of, it's even like 20 minutes around, depending on what time of year, but when the sun will be shining sort of directly at the seating levels. And so, having that information, I think we can, make sure that organizers are aware and look at the types of events that are programmed and maybe shift, the times slightly to accommodate that.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. And then my other question was about the size of the plaza. And I know I've expressed my concern before, but the examples that were given were very helpful in terms of the other types of plazas or stages. Most of them, except for one, were quite a bit smaller, and the one that was larger was only 10 square meters larger. And seeing as we're not anticipating having any massive events, because we're limited to 1,000 to 1,300 people, and then I look at the current festival events that could definitely go on there, and then some proposed ones that might go on there. I'm just wondering, like, which ones of those require such a large, I'm not going to call it a stage, because I was corrected earlier today. It's not a stage, it's a plaza. And until Councillor O'Neill talked about the dancing that was going on in when he was in Europe, I could see people dancing on the plaza for sure. But most of these events that we're talking about are using it as a stage, aren't they?
Ms. Hunt.
Thank you. Yes, to clarify, even though it looks, like it's slightly raised at the front, and that's really because at the back it's at grade. We have the pathway at the back, and then the plaza comes across, and we could have kept it flat all the way up to the seating area. However, we've sort of put in 3 steps down to provide a walkway between that plaza area and the first level of seating. That's to sort of define that is a space that could be used to bring in a portable stage. So it is sized so that we could bring in a large portable stage like we use at Canada Day and other larger events. But it's flexible enough that you could actually set up chairs. If you were to do the dance type thing, you could set up chairs. People could be on the plaza, or on the plaza within that area, without needing a stage. It can be, it's just a it's a plaza, and it's flexible, and you can, scale up by bringing in bigger stages and or you can scale down by having a more intimate event where you actually bring on temporary chairs, and that, that sort of thing. Sorry, I lost your question.
No, I was asking about the size, and I guess my concern too is we talk about, it will be used for a lot of smaller community events. Well, to me, it loses the intimacy because it's just such a massive stage, right? And so what you're saying is for those smaller events, they could just put the chairs right on the plaza and. Okay.
Exactly. People could sit up on the concrete level seating, but they could also bring it right in, and that would actually allow them to hold their event, and still people would be able to sit up on the grass and put their back against the concrete and look at the lake and read their book, but also wouldn't interfere. They could see what's going on in the plaza, but the plaza would hold this small community event if it's a school performance or something. So it allows for that double use.
Well, that's helpful because the drawings, the schematics, they show like 8 people up on stage and they look like ants, right? And so I just try and understand. Okay.
Unfortunately, the consultants have tried to. They've used sort of a wide angle. If you take a photograph and you use that wide angle lens, it sort of distorts it all, and that's unfortunately the way these diagrams have come out as well. They've sort of been stretched, so that's making it look even larger than it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cirillo.
I'll start by saying we've got a couple of pretty good salesmen around the table tonight because two of our councillors just came back from Europe, and they've all got us picturing in our mind some sort of Plaza in Siena or some great festival in Lisbon. And can I just say, someone that lived in Europe as a child and also as a working adult, the reality of the romance of a holiday vacation in the summer months of Europe is certainly not what we are going to be dealing with here in Coquitlam, where it rains 9 months of the year. But the other thing I wanted to say about that is one of the charms of Europe, not just the plazas, but their high streets, is the density of population. And unfortunately, the geography of Canada doesn't warrant the density of population. And it's why many of the things that happen in Europe don't work in Canada, because we don't have the density of population. We don't have walking distance from this stage over to a coffee shop after 6 p.m. We don't have walking distance to many things that would happen in Europe. So while I appreciate the salesmanship, I'm not picturing that in my mind. Not an argument at all about whether a stage should happen or not, even in this location. What I'm struggling with is this the appropriate time and the appropriate size of investment in relation to all the other priorities that are in the city right now. And at this point, although I absolutely admit that I voted for this initially when it came, that I thought, yes, I'm ready for it to go to public consultation, I'm in support of it. I was surprised when the community feedback came back and showed basically a 50-50 split. It showed a split of whether the community even really wanted this. So that's where I initially said I can't support this with the current amount of research. I know it was stated today by one of our other councillors that there's stats somewhere in the 80% about an outdoor plaza. But again, the question was asked on the phone about an outdoor plaza. This is not a traditional outdoor plaza. The traditional outdoor plaza is the one that we just heard in Europe. That's what comes to your mind. This is a grass area with a stage. So I just want to make sure that we bring it back to the reality of what we're dealing with. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the Arts and Culture Master Plan. I think with a project of this size, with this much importance, that's not just happening isolated on its own, it's happening as part of a holistic overview for the area and for the Town Centre Park, that we should be sure that we are doing our due diligence to understand all of the factors that are going to go in that park, as well as what's going to be the impact or change that happens with the Evergreen line. So I'm uncomfortable with going ahead on this before a holistic view. And I'm wondering, what is the rush? Is it about trying to meet the July 1st date? And I guess through the chair, I would ask, are we going to cancel Canada Day if we don't have a performance stage for July 1st?
You're asking me?
Well, I'm asking through the chair to staff, is this a must-have?
Canada Day will go on, I suspect, across the country and in Coquitlam. Mr. Alueva.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Of course, a project of this magnitude, there's really no deadline. The deadline is getting it right and getting the project designed and the investment made at the right time and in the right location with the right design. If the timing works on construction, that we can have it available, that would be great, but we've made do with temporary staging, and we will make do next year as need be. Historically, when this project first was being brought forward a year and a half ago, the thought was we could be in time to accommodate the 2016 celebrations, and that would be a great thing if that were to occur. But the goal here is to make sure that we make the right investment in the right location. We feel the project does that, but that certainly take council direction on that. If it were to be approved as presented today, it would be available for 2016. for the celebrations for the anniversary and the games.
So I thank you for that, because that's kind of where my head is at, is that, you know, this is going to be awesome whether it becomes before July 1st or it comes after July 1st, but let's make sure it's part of a whole holistic view. And at this point in time, I really feel like it's a gamble with a 50-50 split, and a 50-50 split on a very small sample makes me very nervous. It's a 50-50 odds that this is going to satisfy the community, and it's almost $3 million. So I'm sorry to say, I just want it to slow down. I just want us to take the time to do it right. And in closing, can I also add on the comments for the UAAC? It did come to UAAC in March, initially before we had more detailed design, and there was a request for a bathroom. I know there's been discussion that bathrooms aren't important. Bathrooms are extremely important, especially for women, especially with people with disabilities, and especially for seniors. We need to have bathrooms, and I think that it's not inclusive to put together something that can only appeal to those that are not requiring a bathroom. And I think it's going to be awesome. I just want us to do it right. Thank you.
Okay, I'll add a couple of comments of my own. I haven't heard the comment that washrooms aren't important. I think a lot of council actually is trying, we're trying hard to make sure we get washroom facilities in as many parks as possible, and we have washroom facilities in this particular park. We have washrooms in two different areas of the stadium portion of the park. We have washrooms at Evergreen Cultural Center when it's open. I want to actually see us append, and we've talked to staff about the possibility of appending to Evergreen Cultural Center an additional set of public washrooms, whether it's possible or feasible or easy to put it in another place in the park. Often the most expensive part of washrooms is the servicing, trying to get plumbing and a wastewater line to gravity feed back into a system when you're in the middle of a park next to a lake is complicated. But I count on staff as we roll out what I think will become an excellent, an amazing amenity for Coquitlam, the town center park. It will have washrooms in lots of portions of the park, and I don't think that'll be a barrier. I absolutely agree. In fact, I'm one of those that is pretty darn passionate about making sure, particularly for women's washrooms, that we make them available and we don't always rely during festivals on portable washrooms. They're not as they're losing acceptability in some cultures, and let's face it, they're more awkward for one of the two genders. That said, this particular facility, I think, is from my perspective, is something we do need in our community. I think Coquitlam, actually, it's odd talk about population density. Metro Vancouver has population density that rivals a great many of the European cities that were talked about here. Suburban Barcelona has population densities very similar to Coquitlam. Milan has almost identical population density, particularly in the suburbs, and you end up with, I think, a culture in Europe, in many European cities, that embraces this kind of thing, and a culture, I want to see us do that as well. However, we, for example, have heard resistance to one of our local restaurants that wanted a later hours opening on a patio. There was resistance to that, and for good reason, because the noise would rise up into the apartments above because of that proximity. This one doesn't have the proximity issues. It certainly is significantly close to some residential buildings 300 or 400 meters to the south, I think, and we have to manage that, and and I'm glad that those people have come out and commented, because I want to make sure we do that portion of it right. We will be in control of the volume dial at the park. We own it, and that's our volume. So I want to make it work. I think it was Councillor O'Neill that mentioned how comforted he was by the analysis related to noise, though, because I was as well. It really shows that on Canada Day, for example, the noise level didn't go up at all during Canada Day, other than when the fireworks started, and that wasn't so much a performance plaza sort of issue as the fact that there were pyrotechnic explosions going on The rest of the time, in fact, in many ways, the ambient noise went down during the day and evening on Canada Day because perhaps there's less traffic on a stat holiday, so it was actually quieter. So that said, I've had discussions with staff and with some of my colleagues about the possibility of even tweaking it further, because I, as Councillor Zerla just said, I want this done right. This morning at dawn, I headed up to Surrey to remind myself about what Holland Park looks like. The Holland Park has a facility like this in Surrey. It's surrounded by high-rise residential. And that's where their Canada Day takes place. That's where their Fusion Festival takes place over 2 days. Really loud music from South Asian cultures primarily, and really quite loud. And I don't know what the complaint profile is, but I know that it certainly could be heard a couple of blocks away where I ended up having to park when I went to Fusion Festival. But I recognize that I think perhaps the community that lives around that kind of urban park may well take into account that that's one of the things on several days a year that takes place in the park. I want still us to have control of that volume button. The one concern I had, and it was related to photo number 4 of attachment of the photos, and that is the wide-angle computer-generated image. CGI actually is notorious for potentially distorting, and this one looks essentially like a moonscape. It's a very large-looking, stage-looking structure, and we had a chat with staff this morning because it isn't the stage, actually, that's the plaza. The one that compares the comparison plaza, which I think is in Ladysmith, that was among the examples cited in the report, is actually the reverse of this. It has the tiers of seating coming down the hill, and then the plaza's at the bottom. It's the lowest element is the plaza. In our instance, the tiered seating comes down. The lowest element is that ring route, and then there's a couple of stairs back up to the plaza level. And that one struck me as odd. It's the reason I went back out to Surrey and also to Langley to see their Spirit Square, because it's a raised platform similar to Port Moody's at Rocky Point and Port Coquitlam's at Lee Square, and well, most of the others. Our Spirit Square, for example, is a raised platform about 600 millimeters high. This one is a raised platform, but it's not the stage. It's actually the performance plaza, and that one element. So I asked staff whether it's possible to contemplate leveling that off or something so that we remove the I think it's a misperception. The public gets the perception, and I've heard several people comment to me, well, that's a very large stage. Well, it isn't the stage at all. That's a very large, it's a large performance plaza, but it's not larger than Ladysmith or larger than any other performance plaza on the Quay, for example. So there's lots of detail that you need to look at in examining these to make certain that we are going in the right direction. I think we absolutely are. Could it be better? I think we can continue to tweak these kinds of things and tweak the entire park for that matter to make certain that in every step we try for the very best we can. I wouldn't mind this one being downsized slightly because I think there's a perception in the public that it is that it is perhaps too big. To me, it isn't necessarily too big for that 2 or 3 events a year, but it would be very large for some of the other smaller events that it's going to host. That said, I'm comfortable with it, and if my colleagues are comfortable with it, I will be pleased to see it progress. Now, as for the noise, I do want us to mitigate that. I want us to find, to essentially to evaluate it if this proceeds, to examine it closely as we put this into operation and make certain that the public is in fact comfortable. I perceive, though, that at some point this is going to be used far more often for people sitting down and reading a book as they do now on that slope. People enjoying the park, people enjoying what we've created there in a space that used to be a gravel pit. This was not a pristine forest. This isn't a beautiful, pristine lake. This is a gravel pit that we have been converting over decades now, a couple of decades, into a jewel of a park, and this, I think, will be quite a crown in that jewel of a park. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I find it exciting that this location was confirmed for a performance area back in 1995 because of its, the views, the park amenities, the location and whatnot. And I find it exciting now that it's taken 20 years, but now 20 years later, it's finally coming to fruition. And Mayor Stewart beat me to it, but yes, that area used to be a gravel pit. So to think of what a beautiful area it is now at the very end of the Evergreen line in our, vibrant downtown urban center is, to me, is very exciting. And I want to just reiterate that, I guess we could always maybe tweak things in different timing and make things better, but you read this report and there was many, many design criteria and objectives identified, including being lakeside in the heart of the park, allowing for event flexibility, but also functions as a public space year-round, maintaining and integrating existing trail pathways, working with the grading to reduce construction costs, allowing for portable performance and production infrastructure such as mobile stages and lighting, accommodating a wide range of audience sizes, barrier-free access, environmental impacts. There's all of these criteria and objectives identified, and all of them were met. So I just want to say that another thing I want to add is, although I didn't travel overseas this summer and go anywhere what my colleagues were describing, I was in Edmonton earlier this year, and on my last day there, it was the lunch hour, and I was wandering through the downtown core, and there's a big public plaza there, probably maybe about the size of this stage, just a public area. It was a sunny day, but it was so vibrant. There was people sitting on tables having lunch, sitting on blankets having lunch. There was over in the corner, there was music, and there was, employees doing Zumba on their lunch hour. There was artists sitting there painting and drawing on their easels. There was people playing the big giant checkers, and it really was it brought people together. And we are expected to have another 100,000 people added to the Coquitlam population over the next 2 decades. So our neighboring cities have a performance plaza. We're growing. We have our urban center, the Evergreen line. The population's growing. And Councillor O'Neill spoke of it already, but I'm vice chair on the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee. And having an opportunity for more arts and culture in the park has been very positively received. I'm a big sports fan as well. Town Centre Park has got world-class turf and track and facilities, and I think it's fantastic to now have more focus on performances and arts and culture, but also the social, bring people together, gathering space as well. So just want to make sure. So yeah, I've attended many different outdoor events in many different communities, and I'm in support of this being added to our Town Centre Park as a year-round urban plaza. Thank you.
There you go. The speakers. We're all fine with all three, and I'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Cirillo is opposed. The motion carries.
Next item, item 6, concerns Place Maillardville Community Centre. It's an update report. Staff recommendations that Council continue to express support for the current operating model of Place Maillardville Community Centre and the work of the Société Place Maillardville Society Board, based on the improved operations governance over the past 2 years. 2, endorse staff continuing to work with the board to complete a service agreement with the city's Parks, Recreation and Culture Services Department to implement the delivery of services as per the 2015 Master Plan final draft. And 3, confirm the replacement of the Place Maillardville Community Centre facility as a longer-term 2020 to 2025 priority, utilizing the $10 million set aside in the Building Replacement Reserve to be undertaken after the Maillardville Recreation Services Review is completed and long-term service needs are determined.
Okay. You were okay, but now you're second. I need a motion? Okay, well, hang on a second. We've got Councillor Hodge moved, seconded by Councillor Zerillo. A request has been made for separation, so we'll separate. And now I will go to call it Councillor Hodge.
Okay. This has been a long time in the planning, a long, long time. I think when I came on the council, I was already seeing artist renderings and they were being discussed. So this is, I guess the first question I have for staff is that it says here that you're recommending the facility as a long-term priority, 2020 to 2025. And I'm just wondering what that entails. Is that in that period we would do the study, another study, that would begin construction, or we would be complete construction and open for business? So I mean, that's a 4-year process in that 10-year window. So I'm just sort of wondering where in that 10-year window we'll actually be in the facility.
Through the chair, thank you. Yeah, the idea, and I think we've also indicated that there's some costing that we've highlighted for the next 5 years for essentially the investment we'll make in the next 5 years in Place Maillard is in the range of about 1.5 million. The idea is that the 2020 to 2025 would be when we get into some of the more detailed planning and construction. So that the idea is in that period, I would expect that by 2025, we would have a new facility in operation. That would be the goal. Some of the planning for that would have to start taking place in 3 to 4 years, 2 to 3 years, we would see. But the goal would be that by 2025 at the latest, we have a new facility in operation. And that essentially our vision, just looking at overall priorities, it was really highlighted in what we're saying here is that we will be investing in the facility to maintain it operationally in good shape for the next 5 years. But post that period, we expect that at some point in a year or two, and again, there's a lot of other city priorities that would be coming forward for council consideration in the long-term facility planning. But I would expect that sometime between 2020 and 2025, there would be a brand new Place Maillardville Community Center in operation.
So the concern that I have is that my understanding is this discussion began, 6-7 years ago, because of the condition of the building. And at that time, there was discussion about putting a new roof on, doing this. And I think that the general conclusion is that the amount of work required to do the repairs and to put money into it and still not have a building that we would build today because of the design of, it's just not as functional as for the programming that the society wants to put there and the program that I want to see there. So it started off as well, we're going to put money into it, and then we decided, no, we're better to build a different, just start over again, essentially. And from there have been a number of different discussions that have taken place. Along the way, we've asked for a governance review. That's been done. Everybody in Maillardville and staff and everybody has done everything that they've been asked to do. And then now we're looking at making this a longer-term priority. I know that one of the reasons it's come up is, well, because, we don't know what the impact will be if there's a Y. To me, I don't see a connection between the type of programming that we would offer in Maillardville and what would be offered up in the far reaches of Coquitlam. I don't see that connection. I think that the residents of Maillardville and in the South Austin area, I think that they deserve something sooner than that. And I think they deserve to have a center that will provide programming in that community. I don't know how big it needs to be. I think there's still some questions, but we're in the middle of a master parks plan. And I think that it's fair to say we should wait till the master parks plan is complete. But to then say, well, we're going to do a study of the needs in Maillardville, or we're going to do another study, or we're going to look at Poirier, at some point we have to make a decision and say it's time to move forward. The citizens of Maillardville deserve better. They've been waiting a long time. They've been watching development in other parts of the community. They've been watching amenities being built up in the northeast and plans being made for Coquitlam, and they have waited, and they've waited patiently for their turn. We want to see revitalization in the Maillardville area. We want to see economic growth, and we want to see cultural revival. But and we want to see investment in this community, yet we're hesitating and delaying on making our own investment. I don't know what kind of a message we're sending when we're not stepping up and saying, we believe in Maillardville, we believe the time is now to do it. So I want to see us sending a positive message. I want to see this move forward. I don't think that we should be waiting that long. I think the planning should begin immediately. A lot of the work has already been done. I think we should get on with it. And quite frankly, I'd rather see it opening before 2020, not the planning process beginning in 2020. So I'd like to make a motion to make an amendment to the third part. I don't know if we're going to move separation, and then I can talk about the third part. But I'd like to change facility as an immediate priority and take out the 2025 and just say to begin, following the completion of the Master Parks Plan, which will be later this year. So I'd like to move that we move this timetable up and that we make this a more immediate priority and not a long-term priority.
Okay, we can do it this way. You're the one who moved the motion. So you could have moved the motion as you could have moved the motion with the amendment in it.
Okay.
Okay. But anyway, I've got a speakers. I've got a short speakers. There's 3 more people that want to speak on this item at this point, and it might be that there's more. So I'm tempted to go through the speakers list and then bring up the amendment.
And so that's why there was the hesitation to move.
But and I get it. This why I've got a real problem with the idea of 2025 myself. We've been keeping this community in abeyance for many years. So let's hold that thought if that's okay with you, Councillor Reid.
I under no circumstance will move it past 2020. They've been waiting for years. 2008 or 9, I can't remember. Mr. Mayor, you and I spoke about that earlier today. Mm-hmm. It was a crisis down there, and we went in, and staff went in and got the place up and running, and we said that we were going to monitor it and then get on with replacing or adding on to or fixing whatever the study said that we should do this building. And then along came the Y. And the Y at that time wasn't sure whether they were going to go close to the Maillardville area or not. And now we pretty well know it's or not. So it's time to get on with this. It really is. And I want to see the $10 million. And I was just trying to reread this. So utilizing the $10 million, I think we had a discussion that we do not want to move that to any other projects. And as far as I'm concerned, I want to see the new building up and running by 2020, not 2025. And that's even a stretch for me, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. I think Councillors Hodge and Reid have touched on a number of the items, and it pertains to timing. I think when you look at this area and say that a number of years ago we went to the organization that's operating and said, you know what, we want you to take a look at your structure. We want to take a look at the governance. We want to do some different things, and before we can go do anything. So I think to go to them and work, and I appreciate everything that staff has done with it and all the parties that have been at the table, the stakeholders. The current operating model, I think that's great. It appears to be going in the right direction. That's wonderful. Continue working to complete the service agreement. I think great. Those first 2 points, I believe we're in agreement on them. We do move forward. I am incredibly challenged by the timing on this to look and say, let's put this out to 2025. I recall when I first ran for public office, I was campaigning in 2008, and it was an issue then. And it was an issue that well predates that. And so to look and say 2025 we'll have the doors open at the latest, I think that's too long a timeline. I've said in the past, I don't believe the why will have an impact on this significantly. So I think we do need to move forward. On page 2 of the report, it speaks to completing the rec service program delivery, doing the service agreements. And I think we can identify and concurrently do a review to identify any other desired programs that either as a city we might want to see happen there, or as providers. They look and say, you know what, we're getting requests for this. Whether that be from various multicultural components, don't know. But I think those two things can be done concurrently. So what are the service agreements for now, and what are the requests that we want to look at for future? Absolutely, there's going to be more discussion with regards to the Fraser Mills and what might happen there. The Arts and Culture Heritage Strategic Plan, we expect to see that back late this year. I think that should give us enough of a grounding with the history that we've got there, that we can come up and say, you know what, let's come forward and look for the early part or mid part of 2016 to know that this is what we need, this is the planning is going to start on this date, and we look to have shovels in the ground well in advance of that 2025 timeline. So I would agree, if we could see this turned around by 2020 where the doors are open and we're celebrating something new and spectacular, that's a timeline that I think would be more acceptable. So I appreciate Councillor Hodge's discussion about moving forward the timeline, and I would certainly be supportive of that. Again, thank you to staff for the work you've done to this point with the governance, for the stakeholders, the governance and all that. Let's move the timeline. Let's get the shovels in the dirt, because the folks that live down here have waited long enough, and I know that we've got programs in place to help revitalize and encourage revitalization, and I think as a city we can show leadership here, and we can put our own money in and say, we're going to lead the way in ensuring this area revitalized, and this is what we want it to be. So, my last comments. Thank you.
Thank you. From my own perspective, I've said this before, and I will probably say it again and again until we actually get this thing built. So if you want me to not tell this story again, let's get the thing built. I was the janitor when this building was opened in 1979. I was going to a student up at SFU, and I remember being there trying to clean up the last things before opening ceremonies. Jim Tunn was the mayor at the time, and I remember him stomping in because there were several elements of this hastily built building that were still not ready, and it was a challenging building. It had lots of flaws. I remember making lists of some of those flaws. It was built essentially with a large federal grant. The Trudeau government was in Ottawa, and they were trying to reach out, I guess, to the Francophone community and build this kind of facility. And along comes some federal money, and we end up with a building that I don't think ever met our needs very well. It was not. I don't think it was designed so much here in Coquitlam as designed for a different purpose, and it never met the purpose or the need that we have here, and it was not like the community centers in English Coquitlam. I'll be blunt, it wasn't like the community centers in English Coquitlam. It was a wood frame building. It was a not well finished building. It wasn't one that was built to last. It wasn't one that was built with low maintenance costs and with the ability to survive decades and continue to serve its community. I compare that to another building, the Social Rec Center on Poirier, which is a masonry building. It's got glass, it's got atriums, it's a well-designed building, and it continues to serve our needs more than 50 years after it was built. And we won't get 50 years out of this building, although this report suggests otherwise. And I'm determined we won't. This building needs to be replaced, and we made those commitments to the community. There were good reasons why we delayed them, and good reasons have been suggested. The YMCA, maybe that's going to be whatever. Now that those aren't good reasons anymore, we need to get on with constructing a replacement building, with making sure we design a building that meets the needs of this neighborhood. Maillardville has been underserved for a long time. Earlier today, we talked about another facility in Maillardville, Rochester Park, where we're actually finally taking a really badly used piece of land, a ravine, and making it into the only park in about 2 square miles of Coquitlam. Maillardville has almost no parks, and it had one community center that was that is in particularly poor shape. We need to correct that historic reality associated with our historic francophone community. C'est le temps maintenant de faire cela, et c'est vraiment important. I see Richard Coloma in the audience. Richard and I went to school together, and so he would have been almost my age at the same time when this building opened. The time has come for us to move to a new chapter for Maillardville in the provision of community services, and I don't want this building to reach its 40th birthday. Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks very much. It's been, as Councillor Hodge said, since the moment we both were elected several years ago, this has been on our agenda, and we've been talking about it quite a bit. And yeah, it'd be good to get on with it, but there are, on the other hand, a lot of balls in the air. The mayor mentioned that this wasn't really a well-built building; it was kind of rushed and things like that. Well, I want to make sure that when we do go ahead with having something new in Maillardville in terms of a community center, that we do get it right this time. If indeed we didn't get it right when it was first built, let's get it right this time. And what's the best way of making sure we get it right? Is it to build something right away in isolation without knowing exactly what's going to be needed? Or is it waiting just a little longer to make sure that all the impacts of the YMCA, of what happens in Fraser Mills, that's probably too long off to wait. The Aquatic Services Review, implementation of arts, culture, and heritage, the strategic plan, the Parks and Rec master plan, and that implementation strategy there. We have to make sure we get this right, and I think we'll be doing a disservice if we artificially say, no, it has to be done by this date in isolation, because we may end up building something that still isn't right, or maybe could it be a white elephant? Could it be too much? Could it be too little? So I want to make sure that we move in a prudent fashion. We make good use of the taxpayers' dollars. I'm not. I'll just repeat. I'm uncomfortable with straying. I know it's not repeating. I'm kind of summarizing. Straying from the path that is recommended here. I think it is more prudent for us to put these pieces together before we move ahead. And I don't know if we're presuming that if there is a quick decision on this to move ahead, that we're saying it's going to stay in the same location, that we're going to use the 2 extra lots that are next door, that have been purchased and are kind of being held in abeyance right now as potential expansion. And if we are looking at potential expansion, well, how much are we actually talking about then? We're saying this has to be done quickly, but with $10 million budget, that might not be anywhere near enough for what eventually would be needed if we wait to once we've landed all those balls that are in the air now and say, well, actually, this is what we need. And so I want to make sure we do this right. Yes, we've been waiting a long time. People in the audience have been very patient, and the community's been patient. I think we're making a commitment now to, at the very least, we are making a commitment now to do some major improvements and maintenance, and are making a commitment as well to, once we know exactly what is going to be needed there, to do something. And if the staff is saying we really won't know until, and we're not comfortable knowing till further along than what council right now is suggesting, then I've got no reason to disbelieve them on that. I think they're making a prudent case here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zarillo.
Well, I have to start by saying that I see a lot of irony in the comments that were just made as I relates to the previous item. So that made me laugh. So thank you for that, Councillor O'Neill. I just wanted to talk about the strat plan. I am just so impressed with this strategic plan. And I wanted to call out two things in particular, which I did kind of talk to the proponents here of Place Maillard at the beginning, but I just want to note that they talked about the neighborhood rendezvous, not a rendezvous in the neighborhood rendezvous. And I just want to say that that really was I got a very emotional response just from that. And also too, the implementation and monitoring. It says develop a marketing strategy, and it calls it the place. And I could see the place. So I just wanted to say that I think this is a wonderful strategic plan, very actionable, very appropriate size, very doable. And I'm with the rest of my council in hoping that this strat plan will be the last one in the current building.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, we've separated it. I'm going to deal with 1 and 2. Which aren't on the screen yet. Will be there. So, number 1, we can express support for the current operating model, and number 2, endorse staff continuing to work with the board to complete a service agreement with the city's Parks, Rec, and Culture. Are there any discussion over those items? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Hodge. We'll just activate your microphone as soon as you press the button. There we go.
Okay, I'd like to make an amendment to 3 to confirm the replacement of the PMCC facility as an A priority and begin planning utilizing the $10 million set aside in the Building Replacement Reserve Fund, period.
Okay, that is seconded by Councillor Reid. I'm just going to allow staff to contemplate that for a second to make certain that it's both clear and doesn't throw a whole wrench in anything that
eliminated dates.
We've eliminated dates.
Yep. No, thank you, Your Worship.
Mr. Alueva.
Council's comments, at least most of council member, are clear. We had indicated that we want to move forward with the 2016 business plan with the recreational assessment, which until we know what's ultimately going to be in the building long term, planning for a facility, its location, the amount of property needed, its components, all of that would follow. The report is clear in that, but certainly if council's wish is to make this an A priority, then we would make it a priority, which would mean we would advance the 2016 recreational assessment as a major priority next year, with trying to get some of the outputs from that, and the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Strategic Plan and the Master Plan, as well as anything we could wean out of some of the larger initiatives like the Y, and try to bring that together in terms of a rational kind of feasibility of what might be possible, and then we take steps with council to advance the project. I hear council's comments around the hope that it would be completed within the next 5 years. That would be something we would look to as a possibility. Again, over the time of this project, and we'd work with the executive director and the board, and would continue to make sure that we're very confident that the services being provided, would be there. We would continue to maintain the building, but getting council's comments to have a facility open, a new facility, as soon as possible, with the goal of 2020. Again, we would need some time to come back with some additional information over the next year once we complete the assessment of recreational services in Maillardville area, and that would then take us to the next steps around a feasibility for a facility, its location, its size, et cetera, and ultimately the funding, and so we take all those steps. So if council wants it as an immediate priority, we would certainly respond back with that.
I mean, certainly, I'd like to see it open, but to Councillor O'Neill's point, we want to do it right. So I think you've got the direction. I don't want to sort of, create an expectation that this is the date of the ribbon cutting, but I think we're sending a message that it's time to move this ahead. There's a couple more pieces. Some of the plans are in progress. The arts culture strategic plan is underway. The master parks implementation is coming this year. So a lot of the groundwork has been done. The governance is done. And if there's a couple of more pieces that need to be done, then this is the direction to get on with that and get on with the project.
So it's plan away. Thank you. So the motion's on the floor. I've got Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. Oops, sorry, I forgot about how loud those are now. The general manager's answer to the last question or comment anticipated some of my questions, because he said he can get most of what he wanted to have done by having a longer time frame. He can still do if he's just put under the gun a bit. That's good. I want that. No smirking allowed back there, please.
Well, I'm smirking too.
Are you smirking? Good. Now, so it sounds like, yes, you're going to work in some of the impact of the Y, the aquatic services, that'll work in there. How about this major review of recreational services in Southwest Coquitlam? Are you really going to be able to have that done in the next little while? Is that something you needed more time to work on and not going to be able to do properly now before coming ahead, if this motion passes, as it surely will, it looks like?
Just to give council the picture, we are mapping out our priorities, business plan priorities, both planning and construction and et cetera, for the next several years in our planning right now. And as you know, 2016 is going to be a very busy year for us. We've got some very major events. We've got already some spoken for priorities, things that are happening this year: the aquatic strategy, arts and culture, master plan, Smiling Creek School. These are all 8 priorities. So I can only put so many commitments on our staff's time. We have a great staff. Our hope was that the core recreational services assessments that would be done for Maillardville would take place next year, but into the following year we would try and use our resources, because we have some major priorities this year. What we will do is go back and given that this is going to be a priority, we would go back and we would reprioritize some of the projects that we might have on the program, and council will see what next.
That was going to be my next question. What are you going to come back with and say this A now has to become a B?
There's a number of things that we're proposing next year. I don't have the priorities with me because we haven't had a chance to discuss those with council yet. There's a number of things that we've talked about over the in our planning and through the year as to what those priorities may be. We're looking at a seniors assessment. We wanted to do a youth strategy. We wanted to do some work with off-road cycling. There's a whole number of strategic planning work that we would need to do. What we will do, and I don't have the information with me because I was not prepared to discuss the overall priorities. Might be in this file somewhere because I carry it with me constantly. But what it would mean for us is we will go back, understanding council's priority in this area. We will go back, and what I do commit to is showing council not just what we propose to do this year, but what we propose or coming in the coming year, but also what we are not doing that year and that we're deferring to the following year. So you can really see the complete list of our 2 or 3 years out and what we have chosen for the next year, so you can also assist us in making those priority choices.
And so these will be things that council has identified in the past as supportive of them being A priorities, which because of this decision, council will now have to say, whoops, we're going to have to make that a B priority.
Or it may actually fall away from the 2016 business plan and become a 2017 business plan priority.
Yeah.
There's a number like that that we just will not be able to fit in. Yeah, well, Okay, without further ado,
Yeah.
if I could, there's a number of things that we were planning for next year. Thank you, Mary. As an example, having some discussions with council historically, we are going to bring forward Brookmere Park next year. There's some Riverview Forest Trails upgrade, which we've already discussed with council. But the Maillardville Recreational Services Strategy was one of those. Seniors strategy. We have agreements with cultural organizations. We've got the Phase 3 of Glen Park planning. We wanted to bring forward as a C priority. That might fall into 2017. We had the Coquitlam Crunch plan upgrades. That was probably going to be a C priority. We're monitoring the Crunch, the fabulous facility. We think it needs to be, we continue to pay attention to it because of its draw. That might have to be reassessed. We've got an assessment of playground and playground provision throughout the city. That's very important. That probably becomes a 2017 priority. One or two might become 2017. We will work with council to make sure the list is representative of the priorities that you feel are appropriate. But in this case, we would make this issue and this project a bigger priority and make sure we pay attention to it.
So I think probably all of us would be more comfortable in saying, okay, we're going to make an entire new A priority if we knew exactly which A priorities would have to become Bs, or which Bs would have to become Cs, or which Cs would have to fall off the map because of this new thing being introduced. And I wonder, speaking to my colleague here, whether or not there's a way to just massage your amendment a little so it doesn't say a priority, because that has a very, very real, very impactful thing. And there are other things that you've supported as A priorities or B priorities, or C priorities might fall off, and that you might want to make this decision in context with all of those decisions, whether there's a way of wording your motion so it still has the impetus that you want without being as specific as an A priority. Have you thought about that? Can I allow that, Mr. Chair?
This is, you're out of order. Councillor Hodge, do you want to answer that before I rule you out of order too?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where we're going. I understand Councillor Neal's point. I think the point that I was trying to make is by not putting a specific time frame on it, we give it some flexibility. So far, everything that you've listed are all important projects, but they're planning projects. And so this is a plan, but it's leading to a construction project. And I think that the ultimate goal is that we just don't want it to end up on the shelf being studied some more. So that's the reason for the A priority, recognizing we're not going to put a shovel in the ground next September. It's just to say get on with the planning, get on with the process, and that we don't want this to drag 10 years. So that's why the A priority. But I take Councillor Neal's point, we don't want to bump anything, but at this point, I don't think everything that's been listed are just studies.
I think, Mr. Chair, so I'm wondering, having as an A priority without the context, I wonder if you could say a high priority, or a without being as technical as saying A priority, because that has a real impact on that. Now, if it's a high priority, I think staff gets the message, and I don't know, maybe A priority is what it has to be, but it's just making a decision like this without that full context is difficult for me, and I have to disagree with doing it.
I'm going to suggest, while I'm not particularly uncomfortable with the wording, is it possible that you're contemplating something like that staff would report back with a process to raise the priority of the construction of Plaza Maillardville, and then staff could come to us with the various options available to us, and we would be able to make this decision.
I'd be quite comfortable with that, and you know, this is going to move ahead at a fast pace. There's no doubt council's will is that now, and but I want to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing and what's going to fall by the wayside, and by moving this up, and so we have all the facts in front of us. think Councillor Wilson has often sort of raised that. You know, when we try to do things on the fly, he's been very good over the years. A couple of years he's been on council, of saying, well, putting context into things, and I want to make sure we make this decision in the proper context.
Okay, and so while I agree with you, I think that this project will move ahead with quite quickly now with a high priority, perhaps not as high a priority as the trails at Rochester Park, but certainly fast. And
you can't win. You know?
okay, and I'm going to let it die on that one. I've suggested some possible wording. We'll leave it as it is unless there's consensus around it.
Somebody else can. I don't want to suggest that we're going to do a study and a staff report back, because that's the thing we're trying to avoid.
I get that, but we're going to end up seeing a staff report before we confirm this course of action anyway, because a staff report has to tell us which ones bump off. And at that point, we're into October, and that staff report says these are the choices, and we make some choices with full knowledge rather than absent any knowledge of what we're going to lose in the course, as Councillor O'Neill suggests. Mr. Alueva.
Yeah, it just could maybe assist council. Council actually ultimately approves our priorities. All we can do is bring forward, possible priorities for council to consider, and then you can, in your discussions, certainly the direction here is that it be brought forward as a potential high priority for the 2016 and beyond business plan. So if we get direction, which we have from council to do that, we'd bring it forward as a high priority in the for consideration by council in the upcoming business plan discussion. So we would do that, and I think that would be all that we would need. Council can also, at this point, if they wanted, direct us to initiate the review of cultural or the recreational services. We were waiting for this to be a priority, but council can direct that now, or alternatively, you can wait until the business plan priorities are discussed to do all of that.
I'm going to stay with the wording.
You're going to stay with a priority and not higher priority.
Nope, I think it's an A priority.
Fair enough.
We do the priority setting.
Motion's on the floor. We're not trying to edit it. Councillor Wilson.
Just bringing this up, and appreciate everything that the general manager has said, because there's just so many balls in the air, right? And we know, right? I appreciate Councillor Hodge removing the date, but I just wonder maybe if we could maybe defer the decision on this until we see the list of priorities. Maybe that's a route we might be able to go. We've passed the first two motions, but if we defer this third until such a time as we can see, what all the priorities are and how this might fit into it. I understand, where all of you are coming from, but I also appreciate what's in the report, and I too want to make sure that it's not rushed. I want to make sure it's done right, and I want to make sure that it's put in the right context with everything else that's going on. So if we deferred it for a while until the business plan items were done, then we could have a better look at it.
Okay, hold that thought. Councillor Hodge, the last time you spoke, you were responding. You had activated your microphone. Is this your?
I'd like to hear what the rest of the colleagues say, and then yep.
Thank you. I think last week we did have an item, I believe it was from this department, with a recommendation to bring something forward into the calendar year as a B priority. When I think back to my very short time on council, we get our reports and speak to the updates on where we are with our A's, B's, and C's, our trimester reports. And I've commented in the past that each report that I've seen seems to have us on track with everything, all our A's, all our B's, and satisfactory progress on our C's. So while it is a short body of work in which I've seen this, I have a significant level of comfort that we've got the ability, with the direction that's been given, to move forward with this as an A priority this year. And I think back to a comment that our our city manager made at one point in time, and that is, as a council, we sit here and we do good things. And there's times in which we need to be seen doing good things. And I think for this community in Maillardville, we need to be seen at this point in time as doing good things and making the commitment to move forward with this as a priority, I think is a good thing, would be seen in that community as a good thing, and I think it's the prudent thing for us to do. I do not have concern for a moment that we're going to rush and put together a product that is not going to meet the needs. We're going to do the analysis. We're just saying, let's make sure we're doing it. Do it concurrently. Get it done, and then build what we need. I'm comfortable that the talented staff that we have in place, whether in-house or whether we need to look externally for a consultant or something, as we do with most projects, I'm comfortable that we can move forward as an A priority and deliver a very good quality report and a very good quality product that will serve the community for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm comfortable either way. I know very well that staff, when this becomes the priority that council has directed them to undertake, then they will do an excellent job, and we will end up with a building that meets the needs. And first of all, that we evaluate those needs and we make sure we have them, and that this building will meet the needs the replacement building will. So I don't have any concern that we're rushing this. This has been 6 years so far. It's hard to call it a rush. But I do want to see it move ahead with some level of urgency. Now, Councillor Hodge wanted to speak on this. Do you have anything?
I think the main thing is that the priority setting is an ongoing exercise, and priorities have changed in the past. I think that what we're saying today is that we are placing this as a priority. We can't predict and we can't fare a future council. For all we know, a roof could come in one of our buildings or something. So I think that we have the ability to change priorities if we have to. But I think what we've said tonight is, looking at the number of projects that we're talking about, the why and other things in parks, that this has been on our radar for over 4 years. And I think tonight what we're doing is we're sending a message to the people of Maillardville that we want to get on with the planning. We're not setting a date. We're not saying there's going to be a ribbon cutting. What we're saying is this is a priority of this council, and the residents of Maillardville deserve to know that this is a priority for us.
Yep. Okay. The motion is to amend using the language. Do you want to read out your language one more time?
Confirm the replacement of the PMCC facility as an A priority and begin planning utilizing the $10 million set aside in the building replacement reserve. Period.
Okay. That's the motion to amend. All in favor? All opposed? Oops. Point of clarification, Councillor O'Neill.
On the, does that motion, since you're sort of making this an A priority, that would sort of, does that, and it's linked closely with the $10 million, does that make that $10 million a firmer figure as an A priority? Or is that still is, because if it's a longer term thing, I think it suggests the $10 million is something you have to work with. But if it's an A priority, it's kind of suggests it's a priority and it's going to be $10 million. To me, is that what your intention is? What's your intention, though? I'm sorry.
To begin the planning, we could say utilizing the money set aside or utilizing money set aside.
We don't really need any money to start planning as an A priority. It's anyway. I thought maybe with A priority, it might, maybe the general manager might have something to say. His understanding.
I suspect the wording said confirm the replacement of the facility using the $10 million set aside. There, in the end, the type of priority is modifies that the replacement is a priority A or otherwise. But we're confirming the replacement of the facility using the $10 million set aside.
Where the funding's coming from.
Okay, then, does that mean the replacement is going to be limited to $10 million?
No. It doesn't
confirm
even
the replacement utilizing $10 million.
Using the $10 million that's set aside in the Building Replacement Reserve Fund. So it could be $6 million, it could be $16 million.
means this money's going into it.
Okay.
I don't see any, nope. The motion is the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? The amendment carries unanimously on the amended motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's the last formal item on this agenda.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Marsden to adjourn. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now, there probably can't be anyone in the audience that has any questions about what we've just done, but just in the case that there is, any questions on tonight's agenda? Are there any questions from the audience members on items that were on tonight's agenda? Any questions at all? Seeing none, I thank you all for coming. And happy